Everyone, and welcome to my final presentation on emerging legal issues. I will be talking about policing in schools. It's not a subject I hear talked about very often, but there is a lot of legislation and problems coming up with police being in schools and the lack of policies around it, so I thought it would be a really interesting thing to explore for this project. According to Washington state law, it's illegal to disturb school. Any person who shall willfully create a disturbance on school premises during school hours or at school activities or school meetings shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. This means that students can be criminally charged for normal misbehavior, as the law doesn't ever explicitly state what counts as disturbing school. Here is a look at what school crime looks like. So these are all real student behaviors that led to the charges that are on the left side of the screen. I'm going to focus on the first three because those are the ones I really wanted to show you guys, because it really just shows the normal misbehavior that students are now receiving criminal charges for. So for disrupting school, students did things such as spraying perfume, fake burping, fake fart spray, refusing to change an inappropriate t-shirt, not following instructions, and criticizing a police officer. To receive charges of disorderly conduct, students did things such as kicking a trash can, cursing, refusing to leave the lunchroom, arguing, and documenting bullying. To receive charges of assault, students did things such as throwing a paper airplane, throwing a baby carrot, throwing Skittles, and another instance of fake fart spray. I also want to draw your guys' attention to the charges of battery on a police officer and the charge of terroristic threats, which were both made against disabled students. So in the battery on a police officer instance, it was a 5-year-old with ADHD having a tantrum. And in the terroristic threats instance, it was an 8-year-old with a disability who made a threatening statement towards their teacher. So for a little bit of context and background on school resource officers, since it is a fairly new term in the educational field, they are officers that are present at schools and serve as a secondary form of discipline. And schools are allowed to also refer students to law enforcement, as they would normally refer them to other behavior intervention services. Luckily in Washington state, we do have a couple laws that outline what school resource officers should be doing. And I took part of this law that defines school resource officer as a commissioned law enforcement officer in the state of Washington with sworn authority to make arrests, deployed in community-oriented policing, and assigned by the employing police department or sheriff's office to work in schools to build positive relationships with students and address crime and disorder problems, gangs, and drug activities affecting or occurring in or around K-12 schools. School resource officers should focus on keeping students out of the criminal justice system when possible, and should not be used to attempt to impose criminal sanctions in matters that are more appropriately handled within the educational system. Next, we're going to watch this video on the effect of arrests in schools and kind of the snowball effect it has and how it plays a role in much larger issues such as the school to prison pipeline.
Want to test drive?
When a kid gets in trouble at school, we used to send him to the principal's office. Now we're suspending, expelling, or even arresting kids for the smallest misbehaviors. This trend is called the school to prison pipeline. There are pipelines all across the country. Nationwide, as many as 95% of out-of-school suspensions are for nonviolent misbehaviors like these. In one town, the cops were called to break up a fight, a water balloon fight. When you crack down harshly on kids for minor infractions, you're telling them one thing: you are a problem. Suspending or expelling a kid increases his or her chance to drop out of high school. And we know high school dropouts are 3.5 times more likely than high school graduates to be arrested in their lifetime. Sending a kid to juvenile detention center also makes crime more likely in their future. Kids who are incarcerated are 67% more likely to be back in jail by the age of 25 than similar kids who didn't go to prison. And this zero tolerance policy doesn't apply to everyone equally. In Wake County, North Carolina, which has one of the largest school to prison pipelines, 40% of black kids caught with cell phones were suspended, while only 17% of white kids were suspended for the same thing. Though blacks and Latinos make up only 29% of public school students, they make up 70% of students involved in-school arrests or who are referred to law enforcement. Schools even crack down on special needs students, arresting them for the very behaviors that stem from their special needs. 32% of youth in juvenile detention are special needs students. That's the school to prison pipeline, another way that the United States incarcerates more people than any other country on earth.
So, as they touched on in the video, these laws and policies disproportionately affect students of color and students who have special needs. Students of color are 3 to 4 times more likely to be arrested than their peers, and students with disabilities are 4 times more likely to be arrested than their peers. Police are also more likely to use force against these students. Things like pepper spray, tasers, pain compliance, use of police batons, hitting, kicking, slamming, and choking are all things that have been deemed too harsh for detention facilities, but are still allowed for use against students in public schools. Also, according to federal data, sworn law enforcement officers physically or mechanically restrained 86,000 students in the 2015-16 school year, and 71% of those restrained were students with disabilities, despite only making up 12% of the student population. This next video is a clip of a student arrest experience that just describes and shows the experiences that these kids are having being arrested in school, and the effect that it's having and how different people within the education system feel about it.
We're about to show you video of one child's arrest. You may find it extremely hard to watch and to hear. The mother and the child involved want you to see and to hear what he went through in hopes that his story will prevent an arrest like this from happening again.
All right. No, I got it. That's okay. I got him. He's good. He's mine now. All right, don't move. You spit on me, I'll put a hood on you.
Listen to what happened here.
You can't bully your way through this, dude.
In a North Carolina school, grades K through 5,
Don't make a wrong move.
September 2018.
Just chill out.
An interaction captured on the school resource officer's body camera. A student with autism, handcuffed with his hands behind his back, pinned on the floor for 38 minutes. At one point, court records say, the officer puts his knee in the child's back.
You ever been charged with a crime before? You ever been charged before? Okay, well, you're fixing to.
The SRO got involved because the child spit.
But you don't spit here. He's gonna get charged. So, if you, my friend, are not acquainted with the juvenile justice system, you will be very shortly.
The child arrested, 7 years old.
It was horrifying. It was really scary.
His mother, Alicia Girardi, describes walking into the school that day.
At that point, I had no idea what had occurred, and he's just a little person, a little guy on the floor, handcuffed.
Was that necessary?
Yes, unfortunately.
It was disgusting. It's really, really disgusting.
Come on, man.
It was a very rude awakening because when I arrived there and I picked my son up off the floor, he was limp, completely limp.
We agreed not to show his face or use his name so this video does not follow him forever.
We were shocked by the video. We were stunned.
Which says a lot coming from the woman whose job it is to protect students at this school district.
It's not the way we are trained to talk to children. You know, in no form or fashion would our school district ever condone that kind of, almost, in my mind, a little bit of bullying.
And I'm the arresting officer, okay?
The officer defends his action, saying in a statement he did not know about the student's medical condition and was trying to keep the child safe using the only training he had. In case after case across the country,
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
we see the same scene played out. Federal data from the most recent school year available shows 715 students 5th grade or younger arrested at school. Our analysis found Black and disabled students were disproportionately more likely to be arrested than white students or those with no disability.
It's a deep, deep concern for all of us.
We shared our analysis with Catherine Lehman, Assistant Secretary for the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education.
It is deeply distressing to me to see that there are students who are treated differently in school, and it looks like they're treated differently because of who they are.
So I thought that video was really important because it shows the experiences that students are having, but it also touches on the importance that these school resource officers need better training in order to do their jobs safely. An interesting fact that I came about when studying this was schools in Washington don't have to be transparent about how many students they arrest. According to this article I read, state education departments are required to publicly report police referral data in annual state and local report cards. However, the Washington State Report Card includes data only for school suspensions and expulsions, not discipline involving law enforcement. Additionally, ambiguity surrounding how to report law enforcement referrals has muddled the data, further calling their reliability into question. Schools are instructed to report the number of students arrested or referred to police, rather than the total number of incidents, but that directive isn't necessarily clear to the schools reporting the data. Consequently, the data doesn't show how often students come into contact with law enforcement. If one student is referred to the police multiple times in a school year, the data will only reflect a single instance. And although schools must break down the data by race, disability status, sex, and English proficiency, they're not broken down by offense, so one wouldn't know which behaviors are prompting contact with police. I think this excerpt was good to connect because we already touched on the fact that kids of color and students with disabilities are more likely to be arrested. Police officers don't always have the necessary training that they need to deal with students in an appropriate manner. And in Washington State, the data isn't exactly accurate about how many students they're arresting and how often students are coming into contact with law enforcement. It's been shown when police are prioritized in schools, there's a decrease in essential support staff. So on the left here, we have some stats. 1.7 million students are in schools with cops but no counselors. 3 million students are in schools with cops but no nurses. 6 million students are in schools with cops but no psychologists. And 10 million kids are in schools with cops but no social workers. The funds allocated for police presence in school could easily fill multiple support staff positions with people who are trained and educated on the behavior interventions and management techniques that are appropriate for these kids. Police presence has also been shown to lower students' sense of safety at school. Prior to popular belief that it increases safety, not only does handling school discipline over to the criminal legal system hurt student outcomes, but it can negatively affect the school environment. It can promote distrust in schools, reduce student respect for the authority of school administrators, and cause students to feel alienated. This often has the unintended consequence of more misbehavior in the classroom. So now we're going to look at a case of what other states have done in response to some of these policies. So we're looking at CYAP v. Wilson, where the issue was that the laws in place allowed students in school to be criminally charged for normal adolescent behaviors, including loitering, cursing, or other unidentified so-called obnoxious actions that took place on school grounds. The rule they were considering was North Carolina's disturbing school law, which is very similar to the one we talked about at the beginning of the presentation that applies to Washington State. Their application was that enforcing these laws upon students was unconstitutional and affected their personal right to a free and appropriate education, which the Court of Appeals affirmed and said that subjecting students to criminal penalties under such vague rules interferes with their education and their future and produces stark racial disparities. Out of all the states that have disturbing school laws, North Carolina is the only school that I could have found to have changed them. So now we're going to take a look at a clip of some of the other steps other states have taken to decrease student arrests and improve the impact of police being in their schools.
The state of Georgia sees it differently.
We've never done it.
In Atlanta, schools police chief Ron Applin says he can't imagine ever arresting an elementary school student.
I've never seen a situation or circumstance in my 6 years where an elementary student had to be arrested.
After ranking in the top 10 nationally in elementary school arrest rates,
to protect people.
Georgia changed its approach in 2018.
Yeah. You did good? Good choices? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. 5.
Georgia now trains their SROs to stop being cops who arrest and instead teaches them to nurture every student all the way through graduation.
We believe that it's very important that when a person goes from a law enforcement officer to a school resource officer, there is a change in that mindset.
Thank you. You're welcome, Hassan.
After the change in approach to training, Colonel Murray Kogod says arrest of young students dropped to 0.
We want these kids to succeed, and we know they're going to make mistakes. We know that, okay? But the answer isn't always the legal process. The answer isn't always putting them in the criminal justice system.
There are also several other ways that we personally can help limit the negative impacts of police in schools, and that's encouraging and supporting legislation that limits their influence, supporting non-exclusionary discipline efforts, encouraging training such as safe restraint to be required of school resource officers, avoiding referring students to law enforcement over other behavior intervention services that are available to you, advocating for your students if they're facing wrongful or excessive legal repercussions for actions within your school, and talking with your school board about their allocation of funds and how much is being spent on SROs versus other services. So, in conclusion, emphasizing students' right to safe and non-threatening interventions within the school environment is extremely important. The incorporation of additional rules and regulations for SROs, coupled with enhanced training, is essential to ensure a balanced approach that prioritizes the well-being of students. Addressing the potential risk of criminalizing students under laws related to disturbing school shows the importance of thoughtful policy adjustments to foster a supportive and secure educational atmosphere. And here is a list of my resources if you guys would like to go over them. They're all super useful. I hope you guys learned a little bit about some of the issues that are coming out in regards to police being in schools and how other states are beginning to navigate that. Yeah, so I hope you all have a great spring quarter. I enjoyed working with everyone, and that's all.